This is a set of 3D printed optical tube clamps and laser pointer clamps that have a magnet and indexing sphere in them that allow me to attach this laser pointer as an aiming aid for my Meade ETX 125 telescope. And it allows me to detach the laser pointer and use it elsewhere. Now you might ask, why not just build a clamp like this that permanently mounts the laser to the telescope? You wouldn't have any potential alignment errors with this thing snapping back and off and on the magnets. And the main reason, I've done this, it works great. The main reason is I have a padded case, and if this guy is sticking up on top, it doesn't fit well in the padded case. So I can have a small ring around the tube, no problem, but I wanted to be able to remove this guy and put it back on after I take this guy out of the case. Also, I have other telescopes, and so if I do the same thing for other telescopes, I can move this from scope to scope, because I really only need it on one scope at a time. So when someone asks, hey, what are you looking at with this telescope? Hit that thing and say, look, I'm looking at that thing right up there. You can see I'm just off to the right of Jupiter, just slightly there, and this is when Jupiter's centered in my 9mm high magnification eyepiece. Now you might have noticed there is no adjustment here. By moving these rings back and forth with respect to each other, I can do a left or right adjustment. For up and down, I've found that this particular laser pointer, the laser is basically coaxial enough with it, and my 3D printing is accurate enough that I can get this coaxial enough with that tube for good enough accuracy. Because all I'm looking, this is a gross positioning aid, all I'm looking for is to get the star into my 8x25 viewfinder. Once I get a particular star or location into that viewfinder, then I use the viewfinder to really center it. I'm doing this mostly with planetary use, and so I'm using high magnification, and so this viewfinder will get it down to the high magnification area where I can find it, but I needed a way to get the whole tube pointing at the right area just to get that into this guy here. I've printed this one in ABS, but there's plenty of flexibility to get it on the optical tube if you just take the nut and washer off. So once these screws are tightened down, the clamps aren't going anywhere, and you can put the scope away in the foam case, and then when you get it out, you just snap this guy in place there. So anytime someone asks, what are you looking at? You can push the button and show them. Or if you're trying to get it calibrated or close enough to some astronomical object to see, you can push the button while you're skewing it with the hand controller till the laser is basically touching what you're looking for. Switch over to the finder scope and get it dialed in. So the only vitamins you need to put this together are small 4x4x4 magnets, some super glue to hold the magnets in place, and I used an M3 by 16mm long screw. You could drill those holes out a little bigger and use just about any type of machine screw to hold those together, as long as it was at least 16mm long. So if you don't have a problem with permanently mounting this to your telescope, you can also use just this version of the clamp, which is a little bit easier to print and set up. You don't need all the magnets and so forth, but it does require a longer M3 screw to go through it. And these guys are small enough they don't interfere with the motion of the telescope at all. So these half spheres go into those spherical indexing holes, and the magnets hold everything together. So this is the laser pointer clip, and you have to remove the support below the ball, and it's holding up the top of that thing. You could probably just bridge this guy, but since I was using support for the ball, that put it in here. I'm doing support touching build plate only because it'd be a bear to get the support out of that little magnet square. Of course, the north-south orientation is important here, so I put a magnet on the thing that's hooking in there, and then I will push it in that orientation so I know it matches up correctly. So this guy indexes and hooks in pretty nicely there. Of course, the magnet that had been press fit very nicely in the PLA is now being pulled out by the other magnet, so I am going to have to put some super glue in that PLA side and stick these together and hope that I super glue only the magnet into it and not the two parts together. Alright, so it's clear to me that my sizing problems are due to this guy coming up off the build plate, because you can see that that square is rectangular and my spherical indent here is actually oval. So I'm going to rotate this around on my build plate to a section that maybe won't come up as much. Now in the design, these holes are exactly 3 millimeters. With the oozing of plastic, you can get a screw in if you screw it in and kind of self-tap threads in that hole. But if you want it to go through the hole nice and easily, you're going to need to drill it out with an 1/8 inch drill bit. So if you drill it out with an 1/8 inch drill bit, it'll just go through nicely. Now you could tap one side with the screw and drill out the other side and screw directly to the plastic. It feels moderately strong, but I'm just going to drill out both holes and use a nut and washer on the opposite side. So this de-burring tool does a real nice job of getting the things off the inside. I did a little better job on the inside than the outside because the inside is where it attaches to the optical tube. Now you may have to worry just a little bit about elephant footing. So like on this side here, that's the side that was on the build plate, and I can see kind of the elephant foot has been pushed away there. So it's possible that you'll want to hit the bottom edge here with a a de-burring tool to get rid of any elephant's foot on that bottom edge. It didn't seem to be an issue for me really, but that's something to think about when you're putting this on. So this is relatively tight. If you want to put it on the end and slide it on that way, it's a little bit easier to slide on over the end. But if you want to stick this thing in the middle, like this guy here, I didn't slide that over. You can just, put this in here and push and snap. And I'm using PLA here, and it hasn't had any problem with brittleness and cracking. I don't know if ABS would be as good or not. There's a decent amount of arm there for it going in and out. Then obviously you are going to have to get these two guys oriented, and it might be, depending on how you put your rings on your scope, you don't want these opposite like this. Maybe you want to flip this around so they're in the same direction. So that will depend on the orientation of the rings on your scope. So this guy had supports, and this guy did not. And you can see the bottom of the sphere really isn't quite as nice there. So the supports really do help, and they're very easy to just snap off. Now when you're putting the magnets into these, I recommend strongly that you align them all in the same direction so that each of these clips is interchangeable. And then when you have the telescope mount side, you put the magnets in the opposite direction. But essentially this magnet hooks in there, so we know it has to go down in this same orientation here. And so that's the orientation we're putting the magnets in.